News when you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm John Tucker.
And I'm Karen Moscow.
And Karen, let's start with new developments in the efforts to end the war in Ukraine. The Russian President, Vladimir Putin, says he's going to revise his country's negotiating position after claiming Ukrainian drones targeted his residence. According to the Kremlin, Putin told President Trump of his decision in a call yesterday. The president talked about it with reporters in Florida.
It's one thing to be offensive, because they're offensive. It's another thing to attack his house. It's not the right time to do any of that. And can't do it. And I learned about it from President Putin today. I was very angry about it.
Well, Putin said Moscow intends to work closely with the U.S. on peace efforts, but would reconsider a number of previously reached agreements. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky dismissed the Russian claims as a new lie and warned that Moscow could be using it as an excuse to prepare an attack on government buildings in Kyiv.
Well, John, President Trump has threatened to strike Iran again if the country rebuilds its nuclear capabilities. Speaking as he met with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, President Trump expressed concern that Iran is seeking to revive its nuclear program.
Now I hear that Iran is trying to build up again, and if they are, we're going to have to knock them down. We'll knock them down. We'll knock the hell out of them, but hopefully that's not happening. I heard Iran wants to make a deal. If they want to make a deal, that's much smarter. You know, they could have made a deal the last time before we went through, a big attack.
President Trump also said he would support Israel in striking Iran if it continued with its ballistic missile program.
And President Trump says the U.S. struck a facility inside Venezuela in what would be a significant escalation in its campaign against alleged drug trafficking operations there. Trump's reference to an attack within Venezuela would mark the first time the U.S. has announced a land strike in that country. The administration has raised pressure on the government of Nicolas Maduro by bombing boats in the region and also implementing a blockade to disrupt the country's oil exports.
John, hours after President Trump downplayed it, China's military staged a second day of large-scale military drills around Taiwan. This morning, it fired dozens of rockets into waters near Taiwan. China's latest exercises come as President Xi Jinping ramps up military and diplomatic pressure on self-ruled Taiwan. It also comes days after the U.S. announced one of its biggest arms packages ever for the self-run democracy.
In politics, also front and center at the Kennedy Arts Center, after plans for President Trump's name to be added to the building. A veteran jazz ensemble and a New York dance company have canceled events for the New Year's Eve. This according to the New York Times, and it follows the cancellation of an annual Christmas Eve jazz concert. The Kennedy Center chairman, Richard Grinnell, says the artists canceling the shows were, quote, far-left political activists, end quote, and that they had been booked by previous leadership.
Well, John, we turn to the markets now. Futures are little changed following yesterday's declines on Wall Street. The S&P 500 fell 0.3%, while the Nasdaq dropped 0.5%. Still, it's been a good one for the bulls. The S&P 500 up more than 17% so far this year. And Chris Kampitsis is managing partner at Barnum Financial Group.
The reality is, if we look at how the last time we had 4 double-digit up years in a row, that didn't end so well, right? That ended with the dot-com bubble burst. And so if we're going to see another double-digit, high-momentum, high-growth kind of year, we're going to need some kind of Goldilocks economic and stock performance in order to do that.
Barnum Financial Group's Chris Kampitsis and global equities remain on track for a third straight annual gain, with MSCI's World Gauge up around 21% in 2025.
So what's the outlook for stocks in the new year? Bloomberg's Tom Busby has a look at what the big banks and boutique investment firms are expecting in 2026.
Despite worries about a possible artificial intelligence bubble, the Fed's next move on interest rates, and unanticipated shocks from President Trump's second year in office, the consensus for the new year on Wall Street is that the stock market will continue to rally to new heights in 2026 for a fourth year in a row, making what would be the longest winning streak in almost 2 decades. In a Bloomberg survey of sell-side equity strategists, the average year-end forecast for the S&P 500 implies another 9% gain next year. Tom Busby, Bloomberg Radio.
All right, Tom, thank you. Well, we're seeing a rebound in commodities following yesterday's wild ride. Both gold and silver are higher. This is after silver suffered its biggest one-day drop in more than 5 years, falling 9%. And Valerie Teitel covers the markets for Bloomberg.
it was absurdly stretched on some technicals that we knew. It was trading 80% above its 200-day moving average, and its relative strength indicator, or RSI, was nearly at 90. I mean, those are things we haven't seen since the late 70s when it comes to silver. So yes, it was stretched, but look, maybe it's stretched for good reason. The fact that on January 1st, China is going to be putting in export restrictions. So anyone exporting silver from Hong Kong, from mainland China, needs government permission to do so.
That's news when you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Karen Moscow.
I'm John Tucker, and this is Bloomberg.